Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
BJ Show for August 21st. It is a Thursday. The reason I mention that is because of the fact that we do this show live from 7 to 8 o'clock on Westplex 104.5, a.k.a. KSLQ. And then we put it up on our streaming, well, not our, you can stream the show as well, too, I should say that. Then we put it up on our Facebook, God, I can't get it straight this morning, on our podcast format. That is at bjshow.co. And if you want to listen to it on the YouTube version, that's man, I had to start over again, bjshow.us. John, help me.
Brad, you need no help from me. And you neglected to mention that thanks to you, Brad Hildebrand, among many things, you can listen to the show on Apple Podcasts as well.
That's right. It's there. It's all there. Okay, that is John Combest. Every single day of his life for the past, God, I can't even talk this morning. Every single day of his life for the past 23 years, he gets up early in the morning. Or do you do it early in the morning, don't you? Is that when you do it?
I do, yeah. I'm kind of always been an early riser, Brad.
Early in the morning puts together this extensive list of all the important stuff that's going on in the state of Missouri. We sort of refer to it as the Matt Drudge Report, the old version of Matt Drudge, not the new Drudge Report, which is sort of weird, but the old version of Matt Drudge for Missouri. You'll find all sorts of interesting links there. Nothing fancy because the website is done in which version of HTML, John?
0.0.
And what we do with this show, we bring this guy in, we pull him out of the grave, we dust him off, and we say, what's your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And then what does he do? He counts them down, and we start off with...
In third place.
Sometimes you have to give credit where credit is due, even if it's coming from a spot that you don't agree with ideologically. And that's the case this morning for story number 3, because this piece comes from the progressive blog called Missouri Independent. And they have a thorough content creator there who used to be a news reporter and is now a blogger here at Missouri Independent. And his name's Rudi Keller. He's quite thorough. He has an extensive list of contacts garnered through and cultivated through decades of experience in Missouri government. And one of them paid off for sure. A piece that was posted at 6 a.m. this morning. Missouri GOP leader says lawmakers will start with a congressional map drawn in D.C. The subhead is, State Party Vice Chair Jennifer Bukowsky said map proposals are already circulating, and she expects a special session when district lines are decided by national Republicans. Now, Rudi, being the artful, crafty man that he is, was sure to include the line, lines would be decided by national Republicans. Now, if you've heard this before, Brad, when perusing headlines or listening to Missouri political coverage, you probably recognize this idea as one that was put forth by Scott Fawn. As long as redistricting has been brought up in Missouri circles, Scott Fawn's theory, via his Stein of Knowledge, was that a bunch of dork chops, that's my word, not Scott's, a bunch of dork chops or pointy-headed intellectuals in D.C. would decide what the map would be for Missouri, and then they would send it to Missouri and say, you guys do your thing. This is the map. Agree with this. Let's go. Scott's point was, why are we letting people in D.C. tell us what a Missouri map should be? So what's unclear from this piece, Rudi doesn't say whether he directly interviewed Jennifer Bukowsky, the woman who's the vice chair of the Missouri Republican Party. Technically, she's vice chair of the Republican State Committee, but we can just call it State Party. Rudi doesn't say whether he interviewed Jennifer directly, or maybe she did radio. Jennifer does a lot of media. She's great with media. So maybe Rudi heard it somewhere else. But it looks to be directly from Jennifer's mouth here, and that the map will be coming from D.C., and then I guess legislators are going to be expected to maybe tweak it a little or just approve it directly out of hand, Brad.
John, isn't this whole redistricting thing getting out of control? I mean, let's be honest. To me, it's like, okay, this is just political games.
When you say getting out of control, you mean nationwide, not just in Missouri. You mean the whole national picture of redistricting.
It started with Texas, and then Newsom's going to counteract
and
California, now Missouri, and now they're talking about Illinois. I mean, remember the morning when, matter of fact, I'll never forget this because of the fact that Randy Raley brought this up because he had the congressional map on his web or on his Facebook page, and I saw it and I thought to myself, oh my God, that's just horrendous. And I brought it up to you, and you pulled it up in your computer, and remember we laughed about how bizarre the Illinois congressional map is. It's just really weird, right?
Mary Miller, District 15. I mean, that's soon to be Randy Raley's KC district, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
But it does seem to be getting out of hand. Now, the one thing I'll say, Brad, you generally spend a few moments every show besmirching the Freedom Caucus, but let's give Freedom Caucus credit because back in 2022, when there was a debate about what the congressional map should be, those folks, including the Bob Onders and the Nick Schroers and the Bill Eigels, were consistent about the fact that they wanted a 7-1 map. So throughout this whole process, folks like the Freedom Caucus have been consistent, and we should stick it to Democrats.
You know, it's just like if you the national news, and if you caught it right at the top of the hour, right before we went on, one of the stories was that Vice President J.D. Vance was essentially saying to Elon Musk, hey, you better not create a third party. I say once again, it's like watching two attorneys go at it in court, and they're fighting each other because. And
where do they go after court, though, Brad? Is there a specific restaurant that you cite weekly?
In St. Louis County, they walk down the street to CJ Mugg's, and the two attorneys who were an hour previously slugging it out in court are now slapping each other in the back. Boy, that was a great line you used on me. And the other guy, oh, yeah, I can't believe you said that. Oh, that was so funny. This is the Democrats and the Republicans. In public, they fight it out. Behind the scenes, they're drinking brewskis together, doing shots of tequila, all that kind of stuff, and it's just a game. It's just a game. And if you try to become a third party, oh my God, that's just horrendous. That's just terrible. And the way the laws are set up, it's just almost impossible to ever do anything with a third party.
I think that they probably are doing shots of tequila, and they would all agree that you're the worm at the bottom of the bottle.
Thanks so much, John. Are we ready for number 2?
Let's give it
up a notch to number 2.
Down I-44, down Springfield Way. One of my personal favorite shows, the Elijah Haahr Show on KWTO, had one of our friends, Brad, somebody who we've actually had on the show. I gave the stamp of approval for you to actually do a phone interview. And that's Eapen Thampy, the noted cannabis, hemp, marijuana lobbyist and issue expert. He was on with Elijah talking about the rumor that Donald Trump would reschedule marijuana. So in other words, taking it from one category of bad, harmful drug and putting it in a category of, well, maybe not so bad and maybe not so harmful and maybe useful in some situations. I have a link up today, Brad, and Eapen walks through why rescheduling is actually important. And to cut to the chase, Eapen's point is, if you're somebody that just goes to your drive-through weed dispensary and gets some recreational cannabis, you probably don't care that much, about rescheduling. But where rescheduling would matter is if you were someone, you had a loved one in a nursing home. Now, a nursing home's not going to let somebody, toke up and smoke, but they might allow for the legal dispensation, I guess you could say, if that's the right word, of cannabis on their grounds in a few years if cannabis is rescheduled. So in other words, rescheduling could do more for investment, research and development, as well as on the medical side versus what just a normal weed user would notice. And Brad, because I know you would be curious, I went and I looked at the transcript to see exactly what Eapen said about the proposed marijuana ballot initiative for 2026. And here's what he said verbatim. Why do we have 41 pages in the Missouri Constitution for marijuana anyway? I don't think you can completely remove it, being all the language in there. But I think we're probably going to remove like 90% of that framework and just create more of a principles-based framework and devolve the regulatory authority back to where it should be, which is the people's elected representatives. Eapen once again makes the argument that hemp and that hemp and marijuana are coming from the same plant, but suddenly we have 9 trillion pages in the Constitution to say why one is okay and one is not. So you can read the transcript or listen to the interview. And as an asterisk before we discuss this, Brad, I'd also point out that Elijah, immediately following the appearance from Eapen Thampy, Elijah had Senator Eric Schmitt on the show. And that will play a role in story number 1 later.
Okay, couple comments. Of all the interviews, we don't do a lot here in the station. Of all the interviews I've done, the Eapen Thampy interview, me personally, got much more feedback than any other interview I've ever done. And if I told you the reason why, you might be upset with me. So
You've said it multiple times on the air before, Brad. Why don't you access the courage to say it?
It sounded like Eapen was doing more than just lobbying for his product, if you know what I'm saying.
I think if folks had listened to an interview with Eapen where he was talking about chess or where he was talking about, say, a geography bee, people wouldn't have had that observation. But I think that people are predisposed to think that Eapen was stoned because he was talking about cannabis. And as I pointed out before, Brad, Eapen is just an intellectual guy, and he speaks at a cadence that's different probably than you or I, that's certainly different than you or I speak with. So that's probably why you got that feedback, Brad.
Well, John, I don't know what cadence has to do with it.
Do you know what's funny, Brad? And I appreciate the punchline. It registers with me, and I do think it's funny. What I think folks should do sometime when they're listening to the BJ Show on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, go to speed and slow it down to 0.5, and Brad and I sound like we're drunk. Brad, if you've never done that to our show, it is terrific. I have to admit that I played this for the kids the other day, and I played like a 10-second snippet where I just reduced it to 0.5 speed, and it was hilarious. It sounded like you and I were at CJ Mugg's slapping each other's backs.
We're attorneys just got done berating each other in court, and now we're praising each other for our legal acumen at CJ Mugg's. Okay, John, one other thing on this. Okay, as Brad the Libertarian, I say blow it wide open.
Blow it wide open, Brad. Why not?
Just, hey, heroin, yeah. Cocaine, yeah, well, I don't care. Matter of fact, what cracks me up about this is, God, I had 2 interesting interactions in traffic yesterday. One of which maybe I'll talk about in C Block, where unfortunately I got in the middle of 2, and I will say this because it was funny because of the fact that I felt like I was in the middle of 2 Jasmine Crockett's involved in a altercation on the highway, and I was the car in between, and the one lady almost hit my car while she was yelling at the other lady, but that's a whole other story. But the whole thing on this is that, remember when they said, when they're the whole marijuana man, there won't be any abuse of marijuana. How many times, especially in the spring and the fall when people don't have their aircon on or their heat on in the winter, how many times have you pulled up at a stop sign or a stoplight and the guy or gal next to you is sitting there toking on their marijuana product? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's akin to them drinking a Jim Beam bottle, throwing back some Jim Beam as they're driving down the road. Get what I'm saying, John?
Yeah, but it's from the earth, bro.
Yeah, it's from the earth. It's all...
Hey, and you know what? We might have time for this in B Block, but we got more details on the Rhode Island assistant AG. I don't know if you know that she's an AG. Did you know she's an AG? She's an AG.
John.
And Brad, we got details on a little bit more color about what happened in the incident, and it wasn't what you and I anticipated at first.
Well, okay, the interesting thing about that is if you were to do a scan of all the talk shows around the country yesterday, that was like the number 1 story that you and I talked about.
I bet it was. It has women who most men would consider desirable,
yes,
despite the fact that I have a hot person in my life who told me that woman was not hot, and I was like, ooh, A little gatekeeping of pretty privilege there. Anyway, I got us off track, Brad. And when it comes to privilege, there's a little something in story number 1 about it.
And here they are, the number 1.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar dollar bill, yo. Wu-Tang said it back in 1993 and Enter the Wu-Tang. That's one of my favorite CDs that I got from BMG Music. But I digress. Headline from the Post-Dispatch and another one from St. Louis Public Radio. Let's go with the Post-Dispatch headline. FBI to add agents in St. Louis. Quote, highest point in years, says Senator Eric Schmitt. Now, Jason Rosenbaum, as well as Jack Suntrup, both did pretty thorough pieces on this, Brad. The unique thing about this is because the FBI is pretty concerned with secrecy, they won't say exactly how many agents they're putting on the streets, exactly how many middle managers or top managers they're bringing into St. Louis, but they are acknowledging that they're increasing their presence in St. Louis. Eric Schmitt announced this yesterday. And the reason why I bring in the Wu-Tang Clan and Cash rules everything around me is because Schmitt's relationship with FBI Director Kash Patel played obviously a huge role in St. Louis being able to secure this help. Patel says, the investment in St. Louis is about action, not politics, making sure our agents are shoulder to shoulder with local law enforcement to take violent criminals off the streets. He continued, we're bringing the FBI to its strongest presence in St. Louis in years, and we're here to stay. Once again, Brad, Eric Schmitt's relationship with the president and the president's people pays off huge for the St. Louis region.
That Bridgeton boy, he's done well, hasn't he?
He sure has. Between what he was able to do for Boeing, what you're doing now, Brad, and I've read some chit chatter about the fact that, Eric Schmitt in 2015, he was just a Kirkwood guy, and he was pretty sensible, and now he's palling around with Donald Trump. Well, too bad. Look at what he's done for Missouri. Eric Schmitt hasn't changed. People in the White House see Eric Schmitt's value, and they see what he does for St. Louis. So they deliver for St. Louis because of who Eric Schmitt is, Brad.
Yeah, it's gotten interesting. I heard him, matter of fact, with his book, he has been, a guy who, sort of pays attention to other media. He's been all over the place in the last 2 or 3 days. I mean, name a show he hasn't been on. Let me put it that way.
He has been, he's done everything important, Brad.
Yeah. And, but you know what the show he hasn't been on?
And I would never, I knew you were going to ask this morning, Brad, and I would never in a million years subject Eric to you. Can you imagine if I shouldn't say that. Can you imagine if I happened to have a conversation with someone and said, hey, could you do us a favor and give Brad 10 minutes? And they were like, sure. And then you were like, oh, and then do you remember one time? In Bridgeton, did you ever go to Chuck-a-Burger? Do you remember the lettuce they used to put on there?
I don't think there was a Chuck-a-Burger in Bridgeton. There was one in.
Well, you can nitpick the direction, but you get my point. Yes, Brad, I do appreciate the fact that you're a great interviewer, and I would never in a million years ask Eric to do this show.
Why not?
Because do you think you would handle yourself responsibly with Eric Schmitt?
John, I have news for you. In the old days on this very station, when it was a music station, and I did the morning show on KSLQ, I used to interview him once a month.
Oh, Eric Schmitt?
Yeah. Once a month.
Oh, well, good for you. Now, Brad, the other way to do this, instead of being passive-aggressive about it, the other way to do it is you could contact me and say, hey, John, I know you know Eric. Do you think he would do our show?
John, maybe in B block I'll mention this, but I worked the phones yesterday, and interesting, I got a text from B2 Bill yesterday, which was sort of interesting as well, too.
Wow, and how did he end up finding out that we talked about him on the show? Now I'm being sarcastic. How do you think he found out?
How do you think he found out?
Yeah.
Because Eric Schmitt called him and said, hey.
Brad, isn't it amazing that you do a show now that people pay attention to?
John, you know what? If it wasn't for you, I would have never made it into the St. Louis Media Hall of Fame. And I owe everything to you, John.
That's true. I heard it was the Radio Hall of Fame. John, you said it wrong one time. No, I'd love to hear your Bill Eigel conversation. And yes, you're welcome for posting it. I'm glad that folks saw it and shared it with Bill.
Okay, and also I put in a call. I'm a little bit disappointed, and I'll mention this guy. He used to work for me, Kevin Killeen, who was a longtime newsman at KMOX, and now he's the PR flack out in St. Charles County. I'm trying to get Steve Ehlmann on the show. Now, here's the protocol, John, and we'll take another 30 seconds. This is a what would John do? What would John do? I have Steve Ehlmann's cell phone number. I have his cell phone number. I could easily call him direct, but I'm going through the official channels. Good or bad, John?
You're doing the right thing. And I would give Kevin a day or two, and then I would text Steve or call Steve. You won't text him. I would call Steve and say, hey, I know I went through the official means for this, but I'm just wondering if we could get you on Monday to talk about whatever.
Okay.